Somewhere in Texas, a 6-year-old girl was already performing on stage. By 13, she had a Grammy. By the time most kids were worrying about high school, LeAnn Rimes had sold 6 million records and changed country music forever. But fame that arrives that fast doesn't come alone. It brings pressure, contracts, lawsuits, and a spotlight that never quite turns off. And what happened next, nobody saw coming. Her 1997 single, How Do I Live, didn't just top the charts. It stayed there. 69 weeks on the Billboard Hot 100, bridging country and pop in a way few artists had managed before. By the early 2000s, she had moved over 37 million records worldwide. From the outside, it looked effortless. But behind the scenes, things were already fracturing. Legal battles with her own father over money and management spilled into public view. At 17, she was filing lawsuits. At 18, she was fighting for control of her own career. The prodigy image had cracks running right through it. In 2002, at just 19, she married Dean Sheramet, a former backup dancer who had worked with Christina Aguilera. The wedding was in Texas, the relationship looked stable, and for a while, it held. But here's the thing about lives built on constant motion. Stillness is harder than it looks. On the other side of Hollywood, a different story was quietly unfolding. Cibrian had spent years building a steady television career, soap operas in the 90s, then 6 seasons on Third Watch as a New York firefighter. Not a household name, but something arguably more useful in that industry: staying power. In 2001, he married model Brandi Glanville. They had 2 sons, Mason and Jake. For nearly a decade, their life stayed largely out of the tabloids. But that was about to change, and the catalyst would come from the most unlikely place: a made-for-TV movie, a Nora Roberts adaptation, a Lifetime project called Northern Lights, filmed in Calgary in 2008. Rimes was expanding into acting. Cibrian was the experienced television lead. On paper, it was just another production. But both were in long-term marriages, both were quietly approaching personal crossroads, and both were about to spend weeks together in a city far from home. That's when the chemistry the cameras were supposed to capture started bleeding off-screen. Late 2008, rumors were already circulating on set. Then, in March 2009, the photographs arrived. Paparazzi shots of Rimes and Cibrian at a restaurant in Laguna Beach, nowhere near any film set. Within days, the rumor became confirmed reality. What followed wasn't just a scandal, it was a detonation. The backlash hit Rimes harder than anyone. Her image, built over a decade as America's country sweetheart, collided violently with public expectation. Talk shows dissected it. Tabloids ran with it daily. Online forums didn't let up for months. Rimes issued an apology. Cibrian called it a mistake. But the words didn't stop the momentum. Dean Sheramet moved out. Brandi Glanville gave interview after interview describing, in blunt terms, what it felt like to watch her marriage collapse in front of a global audience. By June 2010, Rimes' divorce was finalized. By September, Cibrian's was too. 2 marriages, both over half a decade old, ended within the same calendar year. And the story wasn't over yet. Brandi Glanville didn't fade quietly. Through appearances on The Real Housewives of Beverly Hills and interviews with major outlets, she became one of the most consistent voices in the ongoing narrative. "My life blew up overnight," she said in one widely covered interview. Then in 2013, she published a memoir, Drinking and Tweeting, that brought the whole story back into mainstream conversation. It became a New York Times bestseller. 4 years after the original scandal, it was front-page news again. That's the thing about a story this charged. It doesn't stay buried. But here's where the narrative took a turn nobody quite predicted. April 22, 2011, in a small private ceremony in California, LeAnn Rimes and Cibrian got married. No cameras, no magazine spreads, no media circus. Just a deliberate, quiet line drawn between everything that came before and whatever was coming next. Most people expected the relationship to collapse under the weight of its own origins. Most people were wrong. What followed wasn't a fairy tale. Reinvention. It was something harder and more interesting than that. Rhymes released Spitfire in 2013, a record that landed at number 9 on the Billboard 200. It was introspective, shaped by everything she had lived through, and it marked a shift from the pop-country crossover ambitions of her earlier years. Then came the 2014 VH1 reality series LeAnn and Eddie, a calculated move to step in front of the narrative rather than let it run without them. The show addressed the scrutiny directly, presented their blended family life, and tried to normalize what the media had spent years framing as anything but normal. It ran one season, but it made a point. Cibrian, meanwhile, returned to The Young and the Restless in 2013, bringing him back to the serialized television format where his career had first taken shape. Later, he appeared in Netflix's Country Comfort, leaning into lighter, family-centered work, a quiet shift that reflected something changing not just professionally, but personally. Behind the public appearances, both talked openly over the years about therapy, communication, and the ongoing work of maintaining a relationship that had never once existed outside a media spotlight. And then came 2026. In April of that year, 15 years after their wedding, Rhymes posted something on Instagram that stopped people mid-scroll. She described the anniversary period as marked by very tense, heart-wrenching things happening at home with family. No names, no details, no explanation. Just that careful, loaded sentence and a silence around it that said as much as the words themselves. The couple traveled to Cabo San Lucas for a brief 3-day retreat. Not a vacation exactly, more like a pause, a window of distance. In her post, Rhymes described the experience as layered, tears alongside laughter, worry, alongside gratitude, not resolution, not collapse. Something more complicated than either, and then she wrote something that reframed the entire moment. 15 years, she said, is just the beginning. That's a remarkable sentence from someone who started this relationship under some of the most unforgiving public scrutiny imaginable. 2 marriages ended. Careers survived upheaval. A blended family was built. Media cycles came and went and came again. And after all of it, the scandal, the backlash, the memoir, the reality show, the anniversaries, and now the quiet tension of whatever is happening in 2026, the framing isn't collapse. It's continuation. Whether that's strength, stubbornness, or something harder to name, 15 years of any relationship is significant. 15 years of this one is something else entirely.